I love Guy Ritchie's movies. Except maybe not this one. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, directed by Guy Ritchie and stars Charlie Hunnam and Jude Law. Okay, so this is probably the least asked for movie I've seen since I started making these reviews. The very last thing I want anyone to make is another King Arthur movie. They've never been very good, and this one doesn't really make an exception to that rule. It heaped on like a ton of action, modern dialogue, Guy Ritchie's signature British crime style to it, but it didn't really make the story any more interesting or many of the characters, really. It's kind of rare because in this instance, I actually liked the main character, King Arthur, more than most of the other characters in the movie. Usually I cannot stand the main character, and some side character catches my interest a lot better. But in this case, the side characters were bland, and particularly the women in this movie, it was disappointing how little they were used. Like, Guy Ritchie's not the best at dealing with female characters. In Snatch, he had 0. In Rock and Rolla, he had 1. Sherlock Holmes, he had 1 for each Sherlock and Watson. Man from U.N.C.L.E. only had 1. This one, he had 2, pretty much. And neither one of them did anything. There was a magic girl who did a little bit in the beginning, but then was taken prisoner, and nothing else happened for the rest of the movie. Now, I was a little disappointed that they couldn't keep Charlie Hunnam's natural accent. I've never heard it, but I hear he's from Newcastle, and I'd really like to hear what that northern of a British accent sounds like. But since the character was from Londinium, it made sense for him to have a southern posh accent. The story of it is Jude Law plays Vortigern, the brother of King Uther, played by old man Eric Bana, who betrays him for some reason. The movie explains what the reason was, but I'm not satisfied in any way with it. He technically succeeds in betraying the king, but Arthur escapes and comes back later to fulfill a prophecy. Okay, so here are the positive things about the movie. I really like Jude Law. There was one scene in which Roose Bolton played a local police chief type guy, and he was questioning King Arthur, and that little dialogue scene seemed about the most Guy Ritchie part of this movie, and everything else, it felt like it was forced in there pretty ham-fistedly. And the movie was beautiful. Like, it had Guy Ritchie's look to it, the muted colors and that camera angle where it's like locked on their head, but everything else is around it shaking. If you know what it's called, please let me know. I would like to be able to talk about that camera style more often without having to try to describe it as poorly as I can. I like the dialogue was fast when there actually was dialogue. The music was loud and Guy Ritchie-like when there was music. Like, I want to know how much of this the editor got their hands on and kind of wrecked. Because I watched Man from U.N.C.L.E. on Thursday, Snatch Friday night, I watched Sherlock Holmes and Rock and Roll this morning before going. And this is the worst one. Like, I was not a fan of the second Sherlock Holmes movie after rewatching it this morning. But this was worse. Man from U.N.C.L.E. was good. And the negatives with this, I have a little list. Alright. Vortigern is really one-sided and cliche. Inconsistent pacing. Not as funny as it could be. There's 5 montages, I'm pretty sure. I had to pee during what I assume was the third one, but it might have been merged with the second one. The action was a little hard to understand from time to time. Like, it's better than Transformers and some other things. Like, I at least could follow it, but at times he was just cutting way too fucking much. There's unexplained magic going off and no real idea of how it works or what the power level of it is. And I didn't care. There was a character, I think his name is Backlack or something similar to that. And he had a son, and that was all pathos, and I didn't care when he died. And the movie wanted me to, but I didn't. I was crying along with Mickey when his mom's caravan died, and she had like 3 lines of dialogue. So I know Guy Ritchie can get the emotion out of me, but this isn't working. And then the last thing on the list is that the women didn't do anything. All right, so that's not to say that I absolutely hated this movie. I will definitely consider watching it again. I got to show my friend at some point, but I'm not going to buy this. It was pretty. The 3D was actually worth it for this. Like shit was coming at me, and I was, at least in the beginning, I was flinching, but there just wasn't any story to it that was worth following. The characters were boring, and really, this was really a two-character movie. This was just Jude Law and King Arthur. It wasn't the ensemble that Guy Ritchie is good at giving you. And I feel like his casting has gone downhill over the years. You know, in the beginning, he had. I'm going to skip over Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels because I haven't watched that in a long time. I got it coming from Amazon. But in Snatch, he had Brad Pitt, Benicio del Toro. He was still getting Tom Wilkinson and Mark Strong by Rock and Rolla. He pulled in Robert Downey Jr. But then for Man from U.N.C.L.E., he's got Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer, who at the time were two guys I didn't really know. I knew Henry Cavill was Superman, and I was told Armie Hammer was the Winklevoss twins, but I couldn't remember until I saw some clips later on. But now is the best he can pull is bring Jude Law back from an earlier movie and Charlie Hunnam. Who the fuck cares about Charlie Hunnam? I don't like Pacific Rim, and I couldn't really get into Sons of Anarchy. It's just a shame. This is really disappointing, but not entirely unexpected. I was not anticipating a King Arthur movie to be good, but I was expecting this to be better than average. This is probably about as good as the Antoine Fuqua one, at least the director's cut of it. I haven't seen the theatrical release of that, so I have no idea if that is bad as people say. In conclusion, not really worth your money.